All in Sports Network. We love sports.
Dicker from 40 yards away for University of Texas, Red River immortality. George, he hit it. Dicker, the kicker, 48-45, Texas.
It is Tuesday, October 8th, and it is OU Sucks Week here on All In Horns, brought to you by Rogue Sports Network. This is an all-new episode of your daily fix of all things Texas Longhorns, right here on YouTube and where all podcasts can be listened to. I'm Tanner Carlson along with Jake Jimerson, and we have a very fun show for you. We've got a great week ahead of you as well as we get ready for the Red River rivalry between the number one Texas Longhorns taking on the Oklahoma Sooners. Texas is back at number one after a crazy week in college football. We're going to go through some fun stats since the last time Texas was number one facing Oklahoma, a couple of top 10 matchups between these two teams and just the history of these two teams and what is deemed the greatest college football spectacle in the entire sport. We are very excited for what is to come this week, and we are only 5 days away. We are also going to hit on the last weekend's just craziness of upset weekend in the college football landscape. Jake, wow. What is your ultimate takeaway headed in to Red River rivalry weekend?
Well, first off, my ultimate takeaway is it is October 8th. It's about noon.
And Oklahoma sucks.
Yeah,
they do.
That's my first one. It's officially last week. We started OU Hate Week a little early. We brought on someone from behind enemy lines, had some fun with that. This week, respect out the window. It is OU Hate Week. I am ready for Saturday. Today has gone by slow. This whole week is going to go by slow, and I'm just ready to get to Saturday. And last weekend of college football was pretty fun for Texas to be on a bye, considering all the craziness that happened that we're going to get into. But what a weekend that was. If you don't like college football, something's wrong with you. That's all. And we called it. Everyone's like, this week's not interesting. And you and I were like, there's a lot of interesting games. This is not apple picking weekend. And man, that was one of the best college football weekends ever. Really.
That is why you watch the game. That's why you watch college football, because you're not going to get it anywhere else. I mean, aside from maybe March Madness, you're not going to get the craziness that is college football on a week-to-week basis, Jake. We get this from the start of September all the way through January, and it is some of the best sports moments you're ever going to see. I mean, and last week, we got to see probably an all-time great college football game in Alabama, Georgia. You go 1 week next, you get Vandy knocking off Bama. You get A&M with a huge win over Missouri. You get Tennessee losing to Arkansas. You just get a huge rundown of huge upsets, and we are going to break some of those games down. But first, Jake, let's go ahead and start this show off the right way. So the last time the Texas Longhorns going into the Red River rivalry were ranked number one, it was 40 years ago. And it was 1984, and they tied Oklahoma 15-15 in a barn burner. Jake, you remember that one?
No, I was about 10 years away from being born, so I definitely don't remember that one. And thank God we got rid of ties. If this game ended in a tie in 2024, I think the fan bases would melt down. We'd just be arguing over who actually won the game. It would be the discourse around it for a year would be even worse than it already typically is.
Can you believe 40 years? Not even the national championship seasons for the Texas Longhorns, the win in 2005, and then also going to the national championship with Colt McCoy against Alabama. But never ranked number one going into this game, finished some of those seasons off as number one, which kind of brings me back to my original point when Texas was ranked number one after the Michigan game. It doesn't matter in week 4, week 5, week 6, week 7, week 10. It doesn't matter when you're ranked number 1, as long as you end the season number 1. That is the most important thing. But it is bizarre to think that Texas and the great teams that have been around in the Austin area on the 40 acres, it's been 40 years since going into the Red River game that they were ranked number 1 in the country.
Yeah, it just kind of serves to that Texas hasn't been good enough for a long enough period of time, and some time, even under Mac Brown, they would lose a game sometimes for the OU game or wouldn't be the favorites and didn't perform well enough in that rivalry game. Quite frankly, it's really the only bad mark on Mac Brown's whole career was not winning enough against OU. And so it just shows what we've talked about every single week, that this program is heading in a direction to have a chance to be better than we've ever seen it in our lifetimes. And that's saying a lot, because we did, early on growing up, it felt like Texas was an automatic top 10 team every year. And it feels like Sark's trying to build into being that and maybe even more.
And the last time one of these two teams, whether that be Texas or Oklahoma, went into this game as the number 1 team in the country, that was back in 2008, where Texas beat Oklahoma. Oklahoma was the number 1 ranked team in the country, and that was one of the all-time classics in this matchup, where Texas wins 45-35. You and I talked about that a week ago as kind of one of our standout games of our lifetime, and it stands true to most Texas OU fans who are much older than us, that this is one of the greatest games ever played in between these two squads, was in that 2008 game. Now, much more fond memories of that game for Texas fans, but still a classic nonetheless.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was the first one I mentioned when we started talking about classic games, and I think we're going to be due for several more of those, because I think Oklahoma is going to be trending towards that top 10 direction as that program starts to build back up. They have a young quarterback, young running back. It just comes down to offensive line. Their defense is already to that point. But I'm hoping we get some more classics like that. And I'm hoping we also get some more 49-0s. I could go for one of those this weekend. I love winning an exciting close game, but it's even more fun when that crimson side of the stadium is just empty heading into the fourth quarter. I would love to see a scene like that again.
Dude, I just got goosebumps. I literally, dude, I just got goosebumps. I swear, it's just like you said, that red, that crimson eggshell color is just empty in the stands with a 49-0 on the scoreboard. And I literally, the hair stood up on my arms. I love this game so much, Jake. And it's so much better whenever you win this game, whether it's an ugly win with a Charlie Strong or a Herman. That Sam Ehlinger win was one of my favorite moments, just because Sam Ehlinger is probably, I've said this before, and I like to stand by it. A lot of people maybe don't necessarily agree with me, but I think Sam Ehlinger might be my favorite Texas Longhorn. I understand he may not be the best Texas Longhorn who's ever played, or the best quarterback who's ever played, or the most winningest quarterback who's ever played for the University of Texas, but I think he does go down as my favorite Texas Longhorn, just because the heart and the drive and the pride that he had for this university and playing as a Texas Longhorn, and the fact that he got to win one of these games it is a true testament to him. Jake, when one of these two teams, whether that be Texas or Oklahoma, is ranked number 1 all time, the teams are 9-2-1, and Texas 3-0 has not lost to Oklahoma while ranked number 1 in the country. But that last win came a while ago. 1965 was the last time Texas came into this game ranked number 1 and won this game.
Yeah, that's a long time ago. People alive then some of them had actually seen A&M win a national title. That was so long ago. You got to throw in some shots at the smaller rival too, even after their big win this weekend. But again, it's just exciting. It's an exciting time around Austin. Being number 1 in the country, it didn't really hit the same as that first weekend. The first weekend being number 1 in so long did feel a little bit special. This time it's like, okay, this is cool, but now we're going to hit the meat of the schedule. And as we saw this weekend, no game is safe. Who saw Tennessee losing to Arkansas? Who saw Vanderbilt beating Bama? Maybe giving him a game, but I would have never guessed either one of those would have lost, yet alone both of them in the same weekend. And we almost had half of the top 10 lose last weekend. Should have had half the top 10 lose last weekend, if not for a little bit of officiating help on one game.
There's a little bit of a that's called foreshadowing. Whenever we will get to that game later on. Last stat I want to throw at everybody for the Texas OU game. It is OU Sucks Week. It is the kickoff to OU Sucks Week. In the last 30 years, Jake, the higher ranked team has won 20 of those games. Texas has won 5 of those games. OU has won 3 of those games. 3 times as the lower seeded team. Texas has won 5 times. OU has won 3 times as the lower seeded team. Only 3 times has neither team been ranked in the last 30 years going into this game. And I think that, to me, is a testament, ladies and gentlemen, as to why we regard this game with such high esteem. This is the greatest college football matchup of the season, period. Regular season. Yes, you can go into playoffs. Yes, you can go into national championship. Fine, whatever. That's okay. You can make that argument. But as a regular season matchup, yearly game, Texas OU is not number 3. It is not number 2. It is number 1, and it is because the prestige of these two programs going at it each and every single year, no matter how good or how bad or unranked or ranked, it doesn't matter. You throw away the record book because it's up for grabs any given year.
Yeah, and of those 20 wins of the higher team winning, how many of those games were one possession? We'd have to dive a little further, but I would venture 10 to 15 of those at least are one possession games, if not more, because obviously you would expect Texas to have more wins than Oklahoma as being the lower ranked team, because they've been the lower ranked team pretty much every year for the last decade plus. And unfortunately, last year is one of those 3 Oklahoma wins. And so that's what Texas is going to be looking to avoid, because what I do not want to see Saturday afternoon is a headline that says for the second straight week, number 1 has fallen. And that is something to be scared of. And we both know the way this game works. You know, people talk about Michigan, Ohio State rivalry. To me, what makes this rivalry even more different, besides the prestige, is the perfect split down the middle, red and orange, and just the momentum swings that causes. And whether you're at home or especially in the stadium, you feel those swings as they happen. Crazy special teams plays always seems to happen. Big defensive touchdowns always seem to happen. There always seems to be some crazy plays that just completely swing the momentum of this game. And it's why you hear coaches preach and preach and preach that you have to show up in all 3 phases of the game. And that is more important than ever in this game because of how big the momentum swings are, because you basically have both teams with home field advantages.
And I think that's what makes it so unique, Jake. Like you hit on it perfectly, because you can score 14, 17 unanswered points and not really even have the best momentum going forward, because all it takes is a blocked field goal, a blocked PAT, a good punt return that gets the other team on the 10-yard line. They end up scoring, and then all of a sudden you start feeling that shift, and it typically favors the team who is on the comeback, because you've got half the crowd going at it and pushing that team, and that momentum is constantly building, and it's seesawing. It's constantly back and forth. There's never and I think that's why, to me, one of the reasons why whenever you do get a blowout, it is so impressive in this game, because it is always so close, and it is always a one possession game, and it always does come down to the wire. That if you get a 49-0, that takes just your team being mentally tougher than the other opponent. So by for your full 60 minutes, your 60 minutes of hell. And that's what Texas is looking forward to doing this upcoming weekend.
Yeah, I mean, you need a full 60 minutes, because as we saw in Sarkisian's first year, where they were also not the favorites, they came out, were up a ton of points, and then all of a sudden they put in a Caleb Williams, and it's one of the biggest comebacks in the rivalry's history. No lead is safe in this game. I think one of the years where Texas lost as the much higher ranked team, I read it. This was way before we were born. I can't remember the exact year. I'm sorry. I should have wrote it down, but I think Texas was up like 21-0 after the first quarter and ended up losing. And they were heavy favorites in that game. So going back 50 years, going back 10 years, going back 3 years, it doesn't really matter. No lead is safe. This game plays out the same way every year. And the fact that it's going to be madness, it's going to be fluky, and it doesn't matter what the records are. And it's why there should never be a 2-touchdown favorite in this game.
Yeah. And so, Jake, we're about halfway through this episode, which it has flown by. We can talk Texas OU much longer, and we're going to. However, we had a ton of news break, and a lot of this news of the results of last weekend's games on Texas's bye week actually very much affects Texas's rest of their road and the destiny that they can now control moving forward into the regular season. A lot of these games affected Texas in the SEC. So we're going to hit on that here right now. But before we do, Jake, I do want to give everybody a little bit of a teaser. Tomorrow's episode, we're going to have a really fun time. We're going to dive deep down and give keys to the game and really dive into what to expect from Texas's offense, what to expect from their defense. You and I are both going to have very interesting points to make for Texas's both sides of the ball. And we're really going to take a deeper dive into those sorts of things for the Texas OU game and more detailed talk about it, not just memories or how the game is played, but really dive into kind of how these two teams face each other and some of the keys to victories for them as well. And then following that, we are going to, on Thursday, we're going to have a very special guest. We will have another guest on this show for Thursday's episode. Then on Friday, that is when we are going to give our predictions, and we are going to give your ultimate scouting report to the OU game. And on Saturday, Jake, win, lose, and well, there are no draws, but win or lose, we will give you our immediate reaction on Saturday around probably 6:30-ish around that time. And hopefully we will have big, happy faces, and we will continue being the number one team in the country. But before that is all said, let's talk about the number one team that just went down. Easy come, easy go, Jake. It doesn't always last very long. The number one Alabama Crimson Tide fall to the Vanderbilt Commodores, 40-35 at Vandy, just moments before Nick Saban said one of the easiest places to win in the SEC is in Vanderbilt. And they play that soundbite as soon as the clock strikes 0, and they storm the field. And it was the first win in program history against a top 5 team. They are now 1-60 against top 5 teams. Congratulations, Vanderbilt. You've done it.
And how about, I mean, we've kind of talked about it every week, how Vanderbilt is not, the Vanderbilt from a couple years ago or last year. This new coach from New Mexico State has brought a lot of positivity to the football program that has never been there in our lifetimes. And then he also brought a pretty good quarterback with him in Diego Pavia. I apologize if I'm pronouncing that wrong, but man, we've been saying he's electric and that Texas Vanderbilt game is scary. If anything, this weekend was very helpful to the Texas coaches because they can throw on Arkansas beating Tennessee. They can throw on Vanderbilt beating Alabama and say, we have some Kentucky beat Ole Miss. All of a sudden, all these games that people said Texas had a weak schedule for have all taken down these top SEC teams. And that's not even to mention what A&M did to Missouri. So all of a sudden, the rest of Texas' schedule, they don't have an easy game the rest of the way out. We've been craving getting to this portion of the schedule because it feels like every week other than Michigan, it's been Texas going against a team that they just completely outmatch talent-wise, on the line of scrimmage, and really in every facet of the game. Now it's not going to be the case. Every single one of these games for the rest of the season is a losable game if Texas does not show up and play well.
No, you're 100% right. And it's kind of what Ryan Aber said on Saturday. If you haven't seen that show, go back a couple of episodes and watch, or really the last episode on Saturday, a couple days ago. Ryan Aber, we talked to him about the Texas-Oklahoma schedule difference in the SEC. And at week 1, it looked a little bit different than it does now going into week 7, Jake. Texas, all teams remaining on Texas's schedule have beaten a ranked team except for Florida, and 4 of the 6 remaining teams have beaten a top 10 team. And so those, like you said it perfectly. Those fans or the SEC college football landscape who have criticized Texas's schedule, it doesn't look like it's nearly as easy as it did going into week 1 as it does going into week 7. It's going to be a test. And like Ryan Aber said, Jake, you kind of ask for this. You go to the SEC, this is what you sign up for, man. And each and every single week, it's going to be a grind. It's going to be a battle, but Texas does control their own destiny. They are the last remaining undefeated team in the SEC, and that does mean something. You win out, you beat A&M, who's currently atop the SEC standings. You beat Georgia. You're getting yourself a little bit of a cushion. You beat Oklahoma. Now you're in the driver's seat, and you're not only the number one team in the country, you're the number one team in the SEC, and you're gaining cushion along the way. But it's under your control. You're not going to have to rely on anybody else. You just have to do your job. But Jake, just an overall historic moment for college football for Vanderbilt to beat Bama last Saturday.
Yeah, the goalpost getting taken all the way through now. I mean, that's just special. That is why you watch college football. The stadium was mostly red. It didn't matter.
Yeah.
And just that is such a special moment for that program, because you feel like if they can keep this head coach, maybe they can be a program that's ranked here soon. If they didn't lose that Georgia State game, which how did they lose that game? I didn't understand that loss when it happened.
Mm-hmm.
Now I can continue to really not understand that loss. And they were also very close to beating Missouri at Missouri just the week before. I mean, Vanderbilt's pretty close to being an undefeated type team with that would be in the top 15 this week.
I was just about to say they would be a top 15 team if one or two plays go their way during the regular season, and they're going to be probably one of those teams that one or two plays next season do go their way, and we could see Vanderbilt in the top 25 even this season. You know, it's not that far-fetched to think about it. Another huge upset, Arkansas over Tennessee. Jake, I don't know which one was more surprising, Vanderbilt over Bama or Arkansas over Tennessee. I will say Vanderbilt over Bama was more surprising, but this Arkansas team coming back after losing to A&M last week in the fashion in which they did, to come back and beat Tennessee at home after your starting quarterback, Talon Green, goes down with an injury there at the end of the game. And then Jaquindon Jackson also went down, their star running back, while trailing Tennessee by a touchdown. Malachi Singleton, in the words of the Children of the Corn, "Oh, Malachi," comes in and leads the Arkansas Razorbacks to a touchdown comeback victory over Tennessee in Fayetteville. What a scene.
Yeah, I would almost venture to say this was more surprising to me in the standpoint of how they won.
Right.
Because if you would have told me Vanderbilt was going to beat Alabama, I would have guessed it would have had to been high scoring, just because Vanderbilt's offenses look good this year. Alabama's defenses looked suspect. And that's how that game played out. I never in a million years would have, if you would have told me Tennessee only scored 14, A, I would have called you crazy. B, I would have said they probably still would have won just because of how good their defense has looked the majority of this year. But this kind of shows that, you know, that Tennessee against Oklahoma game being close, maybe that is a sign that Tennessee is a lot more invincible than we thought. And I know they had a weak schedule at the start of the year, but still, when a team dominates like that, you have to jump on the train and think they're going to be pretty good, especially a program that has been getting consistent under Josh Heupel. Yeah. But this was an all-time just laid egg by Tennessee. I mean, this, other than Missouri, this was one of the most embarrassing performances of the week by the fake UT. To lose in the manner that they did. Well, Jake, 19-14 is just, I never in a million years would have thought Tennessee would have lost that game. Never in a million years thought they were going to only score 14 points.
Yeah, well, and here's the thing too, Jake, is Tennessee was kind of everybody's child. You know, they were kind of the favorite going into the playoffs this year. I mean, everybody kind of had Tennessee as kind of the hot commodity going into the postseason. This takes a lot of that hype away. Again, 12-team playoff. Their season's not over. They can very much make a run at things. Their season is still very much alive. However, having a performance like that does not allow for very much leash. You don't have a whole lot of leeway for the remainder of the season if you're Tennessee. You cannot have another performance like that, or else your season will be over. Let's go ahead and jump to College Station. Number 25, Texas A&M over number 9, Missouri. The third of the top 10 teams losing that we have discussed, and 41-10 beatdown. Now, Jake, I want to go ahead and I'm going to take the reins on this one. I have been chanting and I've been calling for Missouri being frauds for the last 2 weeks, really since that Vanderbilt game. Now, Vanderbilt, a better team than they're supposed to be. I understand that, but Missouri has been struggling and their offense has not looked the way Missouri's offense was supposed to look going into the season. I've been calling for them being frauds. It was a fraud alert game. I called Texas A&M winning this game, not in the fashion in which they did it, winning 41-10, but I did call Texas A&M winning this game in College Station, saying, look, this is a big game. You have such a great crowd. Your crowd needs to show up. They did exactly that. Connor Wingman looked very, very good. The defensive line looks like one of the better defensive lines in the entire country. Again, have they played anybody of an offensive line caliber to maybe, test that defensive line a little bit? That remains to be seen, because I don't think Missouri's offense is nearly as good or as high-powered as they're supposed to be. I think Arkansas survives on playing gritty ground game, very rough and tough type of offense. It's not very flashy, and it kind of plays into the hand of, if you have a good defensive line, you're going to match up well against Arkansas. And so that being said, Texas A&M's remaining schedule also not extremely tough. They have LSU in College Station. They have Texas in College Station. Their best remaining road games is, I believe, South Carolina and Auburn. Is that correct?
Yeah. Let me open up there. Yeah, they have at South Carolina, at Mississippi State, at Auburn.
At Auburn, yeah.
And
those are the best road games that they have left. The remaining tough, ranked opponents that they have left on the schedule, LSU and Texas, are at home in College Station. They can very much run the table here.
No, I have two things to say. A, if you're a Missouri fan, that was embarrassing. The offensive line looks terrible. Brady Cook looks like he's regressed. Also, Drink, they committed a couple penalties early, and then they had a couple calls that should have been called, didn't go their way. And I thought the coach led the way for the players to all quit. Because if you look at their body language, Luther Burden hurt his draft stock this weekend, not because of his play on the field, but because he looked like a baby on the sideline early in the second quarter. Just head down, frustrated, mumbling to himself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not what you want to see. Scouts look at that stuff. Teams look at that stuff. Yeah. And I was shocked. I was just shocked by that performance by Missouri. I thought they could lose that game. I never thought they would get embarrassed. And A&M looked good, and I'm going to give them props. But also Missouri looked embarrassing. And they are complete frauds. They shouldn't even be in the top 25 after that week. They should have to earn their way back into top 25, because all they've beaten is a very bad Boston College team that had no business being ranked when they beat them. And then Vanderbilt is a pretty good win, but it was at home. And so
they were heavily favored to beat Vanderbilt.
Yeah, and I am all out on Missouri at this point. If you're playing them, you should expect to win, because all you got to do is get their coach frustrated and the team will quit. And then on A&M, this game at the end of the year, if Texas can get through this schedule relatively unscathed, and I imagine A&M is going to, because their schedule is one of the weakest in the country, I would say, or at least by far the weakest in the SEC.
Right.
That has a chance to be a way bigger game than we ever thought.
Yeah,
and it kind of makes sense when you look at it, because their schedule, all they had to do was really get through Missouri, who ended up not being very good. I think they would be favored. I will favor them against LSU. I said I think LSU is one of the most overrated teams.
You did,
so they kind of lucked out
Yep.
with their two games, other than Texas being two of the most overrated teams in the country.
Yeah, and they were the ones probably yapping the loudest of saying how weak Texas' schedule is. I
hadn't even looked at their schedule because I don't care. And then I look at their schedule and I'm like, wait, y'all have been talking about Texas's schedule? You don't play Alabama, you don't play Georgia, you don't play Tennessee, you got Texas.
Yeah,
and you get LSU in a down year.
Yeah. Jake, Washington over the number 10, Michigan, 27-17 in Washington. Washington favored to win this game over 10th ranked Michigan. So Do you count this as an upset? Is this an upset?
Not by Vegas's standards. I did pick Michigan.
It's
I
very
had
odd.
a terrible
It was such an odd game.
I had a terrible week picking games, and
Yeah.
I picked Missouri. I picked Michigan. I would have picked Bama and Tennessee, but it's kind of an upset. I mean, I think Michigan's going to be one of those teams this year that is going to struggle on the road as compared to home. They've looked like a much better team at home than they have on the road. Washington Stadium was rocking. They seem to be getting to move things back in the right direction. You know, they've had a lot of turnover from last year.
Yeah.
And that was a big win for Washington. That was we're here to play in the Big Ten. And yes, we lost our coach. Yes, we lost the majority of our team, but we're still a solid football team. And I think Washington has a chance to kind of right the ship after having a couple bad losses early. But that remains to be seen if they can win some big games on the road. I think the Big Ten just, for some reason, it feels like the home teams always have a way bigger advantage than even in other conferences.
Well, now, especially with traveling across the country the way that conference has to do nowadays. Let's go ahead just real quickly, Jake. I didn't really watch much of any of this game. In fact, I didn't watch any of this game. I'll just go ahead and say that. But Minnesota over USC, it needs to be mentioned. Unranked team over number 11, 24-17. Lincoln Riley's offense looks anemic, and the defense isn't really the defense actually might be playing better than the offense, and that's telling you something if it's a Lincoln Riley led team.
Yeah, again, this to me just shows bringing it back to SEC talk, LSU is very overrated. I mean, they lost to this USC team.
That's a good point.
And that was the reason why everyone got really high on USC, including me for a short bit. But this is the problem with Lincoln Riley. This is why Oklahoma, at the end of the day, wasn't that mad that Lincoln Riley was gone. Now, he tore apart their program while leaving, and that's why part of the reason they're still rebuilding. But if you're an Oklahoma fan, this feels like one of those losses where you feel a little bit validated that they are right. You know, whether Venables ends up being the guy or not, Lincoln Riley was not going to be the guy long term. Lincoln Riley's not a serious contender to win a national title. I don't think he'll ever come close, other than as close as he came at Oklahoma.
Woke versus Coke, Jake. Number 8, Miami taking on Cal and coming back in comeback fashion in the fourth quarter, trailing, I believe it was 38-14 at one point, something along those lines. And Miami comes back in the fourth quarter, wins this game, but not without a little bit of help.
Yeah. Stay woke on this one, because Miami is the team of destiny through the referees. This is 2 weeks in a row they've gotten an absorbent amount of breaks from the officials, including on the game-winning play, an ineligible man down the field. I mean, at this point, it's a conspiracy until proven otherwise, because the Virginia Tech game, you've had a lot of people talk about it going either way. I feel like it's one of the rare moments where you get 50-50. So the call on the field should have stand, and it didn't. And now you go into this game, and yes, they played well to come back, but I can't believe they're getting all these breaks from the officials in back-to-back weeks. And now they're getting to move up the polls because everyone in front of them is losing and they're in the AAC, so they don't really have to play anyone that good. They might end up in the playoffs, and we'll still be sitting there saying this team might be fraudulent. Cam Ward's looked amazing at times. He's looked very mediocre at other times. And I'm not sure, I think you were asleep because you're an old man, but when this game was ending, Cam Ward got interviewed after, and he has the microphone and the headset on, and he's just letting bad words sling. Just all over the place. His players came up to him.
That's the Coke part, Jake. That's the Coke. All right. We had woke. That's the Coke. That's the whole point of the whole marketing gimmick behind this whole thing. No, but Jake, the number 8 referees in the country over Cal. I mean, Miami over Cal, 39-38 to end our upset weekend, because if Cal wins that game having to beat the referees, that is the biggest upset in college football history, especially over Vandy and the Bama game. Well, Jake, let's go ahead and just to wrap up this episode, I do want to end it with Texas controls their own destiny. From here on out, they have to rely on no one else to determine the rest of their season. By week 7 in the SEC, Jake, I did not have that on my bingo card. I did not have going into Red River rivalry weekend that Texas would control their own destiny in terms of winning the SEC, being the number 1 team in the country, being the number 1 seed in the playoffs, having a bye week going in that first week of the playoffs, and having what should be the most favorable road to getting to a national championship. Texas controls their own destiny as the only undefeated team remaining in the SEC with a chance to play against Texas A&M, the only team that standings-wise is ahead of them in the SEC. Texas controls it all, baby. And that is exactly where they want to be. And I think that's exactly where Sark wants this team to be. And I think that's ultimately the road that they're going to take advantage of as they head into the playoffs. I'm feeling very confident about my Texas Longhorns. With that being said, we, as a precursor, there is not an easy game remaining on this Texas Longhorns schedule. And they're going to be in a battle each and every single week. I would say the easiest game, quote unquote, easiest or most winnable game, I should say, maybe Florida. But again, that's it's still the Florida Gators. They still get good recruits. They still have good football players.
Yeah. I mean, Texas controls their own debt, but at the same time, it feels like the season's really starting this week.
Absolutely.
You had
Absolutely.
Michigan as a bit of a teaser. They control their own destiny, but the hardest part of the road starts now. It starts with a game that, as we saw last year, is not easy to win. And
Absolutely.
winning is hard, in the words of Tom Herman. But we're going to see what this team is made of in these next 2 weeks with right after we get over either the high or the low after Saturday. You're gonna have to turn around and get ready for Georgia coming into Austin, and Georgia's going to have their backs against the wall in that game. And that game is going to be tough. You're going to see a better Georgia team than you saw them play against Alabama. And so the start of the season starts now. That's what I'd be preaching if I was the coaching staff.
With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, this is All In Horns brought to you by Rogue Sports Network. I'm Tanner Carlson along with Jake Jimerson. And Jake, these episodes come out Tuesday through Friday at noon each and every single day. And then we let the football dictate our schedule on Saturday. We give you our immediate reactions to the Texas Longhorns whenever their game finishes up. That is whenever we will come on and give you our take on it. 5 days a week right here on YouTube and where all podcasts can be listened to. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, welcome.
All in Sports Network. We love sports.